Hi everybody, we're going to knock out some really cool Bob Ross mountains today. Let's go ahead and get started. Now, if you've seen the previous video that we did a few months ago, we only focused on the snow side of the mountains. Today we're going to do the complete mountain picture from start to finish so that you have an idea of what to do at home so you can complete this on your own. What I've done here is I've got just a number 5 palette knife and I've loaded it with some mountain mix, and I'm simply starting to shape a mountain. Now, if you're really good at using the knife to shape your mountains, then that is fine. You can go ahead and use the knife like Bob did to get your edges. If you're having difficulty with this, you can also, which I'll show you in just a moment, you can use a filbert brush. Let me grab a filbert brush and I'll show you, how much simpler it is to do it if you're having difficulty with that knife, okay? So I'm just grabbing some mountain mix right here in my number 6 filbert brush. And I'm just going to very quickly sketch on the rest of this mountain using a number 6 filbert. It doesn't take an enormous amount of paint, and you can just easily pop in. I mean, look how simple this is. You can just pop in your mountains here. We're just going to do a super simple shape today, just to make it very, very simple. So I'm only going to do a mountain or two here in this demonstration. Should not take you much time at all to accomplish. So see how I'm just kind of sculpting in just a real basic shape of this mountain using this filbert brush. So whichever way that you prefer, you can use any brush that you're comfortable with. It doesn't have to be a filbert brush. I just happen to have Bob Ross brushes on hand today, so I'll be using exclusively Bob Ross products. So once you get the shape of this mountain, I'm just going to pull this down here very quickly. Maybe I'll put another little bump or two in there. Now, all you have to do is take this excess paint that you have up here at the top and you can just kind of scrub it down. And if you see that cloud I'm covering up, that is from a previous video on how to do the Bob Ross skies and clouds. And the video link is in the description below this video, so you can check that out, and I hope you do. So we're on the 3rd series of the video. At this point, we did our background skies and water, and then we did our clouds video, and then now here we are moving forward in the painting to the mountain. So be sure to check out those videos. Also, too, the supplies that I'm using in this video are down at the description below the video. So what I'm doing right now is just kind of taking that excess paint and pulling that down. If you're using strictly the Bob Ross method, he would, let me demonstrate that for you. He would come up here and he would scrape off this paint and then reapply it down here, scrape it up and reapply it. So whichever method works best for you. Here, I'm just going to kind of scrub this down because you don't need an enormous amount of paint. You just need to stain the canvas. It makes it a lot easier if you use less paint in order to get these down. So I'll slather on a little bit of paint here, and then I'll get out the big 1-inch brush, which is coming up next. If you've got one of those, grab that, and we'll just kind of pull down some more of this paint, remove a little bit of the excess to stay in alignment with the Bob Ross method. But if you, like I said, if you wanted to use these little filberts or any other brush that you have in your inventory to get these mountains accomplished, it's really you should do and use the tool. You should do the procedure and use the tool that works best for you at all times. You don't have to prescribe to some other method of doing things. I'm just going to show you as much as I can here. I'm just going to take this brush and kind of align it with the peaks of my mountain, and I'm going to pull this paint downward, so to the left of the peak for the left-hand side of this little teeny tiny guy here, and I'm just going to kind of pull this paint downward, and I'm going to move to my next area. I'm going to pull that guy in front. I'm not moving a whole lot of paint here because I managed my paint so well. What this is going to do for me is it's going to make these, because I have a lighter color over here, it's going to kind of make these mountains appear a little bit further in the distance rather than the kind of in-your-face super dark mountains that we're used to seeing with the Bob Ross method. This is just another way to achieve the exact same objective. Okay, mostly Bob Ross method here, but there are some minor differences that you can do, and I like to show you more than one way so that you have choices. The more tools you have in your toolkit to get these mountains are, the less similar your mountains are always going to seem. You could get in a rut, So if you want to try different methods, I would totally suggest that you do that because it will give a little bit of variety to your paintings, and it may just make them look better. So here, all I've done is just kind of brush this down. And what I'm doing here, I have almost no paint on my brush, and I'm just kind of using these little back and forth crisscrossy rocking strokes just to kind of blend out the bottom of this mountain here. We don't really need it to go down very far because we're going to have water here eventually that's going to show with something in the foreground in a future video. Today we're really just focusing on how to do these mountains. So that's step one. So get your paint in, brush it down. You can start to shape it, remove the excess paint, and then just kind of blend the bottom. So that's step number one. Step number two is very simple, and what you would have seen in the other video if you had watched the other mountains video that I did. I'm not going to spend a lot of time today on how to hold that knife because that is in depth in the other video. So make sure you check out that other video because holding your knife properly is very, very important. So I'll just tell you in this video, hey, hold it on the sides like this. So that'll make it a little bit easier. But really look at that video to see that in-depth instruction on how to hold this knife properly and the things that you shouldn't do. Okay. So I'm going to pull just a little bit of mountain or snow. Light colored snow into my brush. I'm just using straight titanium white. I'm using straight today just so that it shows up very well on the camera. Normally I would dull it down with a little bit of red, alizarin crimson, or maybe a little bit of phthalo blue in order to kind of tone that down. But today I'm going to go for very straight titanium white. So also too, there's very, very intense instruction in the other video on how to hold this knife up at the canvas too to get the movement. So I suggest you check that out as well. So since I'm going to make the assumption that you've seen that video, I'm just going to continue to trudge on here and place this snow on that mountain. So I'm putting my knife up here, putting that snow on the side of that mountain and just pulling. I'm starting with the mountain that's furthest off in the distance because it makes it a little bit easier to move forward in your painting. So I'm just going to kind of put a little, I guess Bob would call it a doer right there. Put a little doer right there. And I'm just going to pull down this side of this mountain to just kind of finish that one off. Now I'm only working on, I'm assuming that my light source is coming from the right over here, so I'm only putting this highlight snow on the right-hand side of my mountain. And then I will come back in just a moment. We'll mix a shadow color that we'll place over on the left-hand side. See how easy these mountains can go in? Now managing your paint is probably the most important thing here, is if you manage your paint, you get a very thin layer underneath it. It sure does make these a lot easier to get on. So let me go for this larger mountain because as we're working forward here, this larger mountain here would be next. So notice too that I'm putting my paint above the dark line of the mountain up there because you have to have a highlight, bright spot in order to cast a shadow. So it needs to go above that line. So what I see a lot of times in class is that people will put their snow beneath that mountain, so they'll have a big dark line above their snow on their mountain, and that just never looks right. So, the only exceptions are like, over here we might have a shadow on the side, but this is on the shadow side of the mountain over here where I'm pointing with my knife, and that makes a little bit more sense. But over here where we're putting these highlights on, it doesn't make any sense at all to have the sunlight hitting a dark spot, because the sunlight would illuminate it. I'm just going to continue this on, and as I kind of run out of paint, I just go back and grab more paint, and that actually helps us make more interesting shapes in our mountain. So, just come back up here and start wherever to add a little shape and texture to your mountains. One of the things that people often do is they'll cut their mountain straight in half, and they'll just run a line down their mountains. But most mountains, if you take a look at them, most of them are going to have a little bit of a variation in their line, and so you want to break up those straight lines by putting little zigs and little zags in there to break up those spots. And so I'm going to fill that little gap too there because that really doesn't look too right. And one of the ways you can do that is just kind of gently put your knife on here and you just kind of jiggle that over there, and that kind of helps fill in those gaps and make a little bit more sense, I think. Okay, so now that this is kind of simply put in a little simple shapes with our mountains, we've got our highlighted snow on the right. Let's go ahead and mix a little bit of phthalo blue into our titanium white, and we're going to make a shadow side for the left-hand side of our mountains where we didn't put the highlight snow. Now we're going to put the other side in that's away from our light source over there so that we cast a nice shadow. And when you do that, your mountains really come together. So let's get that in. I'm going to use the small edge of my knife in order to get this paint in, and I'm going to switch to my old man glasses because, well, I got to be able to see a little bit better. So I'm going to you can hold your knife however works best for you to do your highlighted snow. And in fact, I think in the other video we talk about how we really don't want the knife to touch the canvas. But when you're doing your shadow side of your snows, you can actually even scrape your knife along that canvas to kind of make that paint break apart a little better. I often do that, and I will do that here today probably to demonstrate this for you. But here I'm just kind of pulling in a little bit of paint. Generally speaking, if your highlight snow went down and to the right to get your highlight in, your shadows are going to be cast down and to the left. So do your shadows the opposite of your highlights. That's always a good rule. And you can kind of even grab the little edge. Maybe you have a little raised part of your highlight snow that you can grab that and you can pull that down. That'll knock down that ridge of paint, number one, and it'll also give the appearance of spilled light over that edge, so that it doesn't make the edge look super crisp and clear, because there's all kinds of little bumps that would allow light to spill through. So I'm going to come up here and kind of complete this. So each little bump needs its own distinct shadow or it won't look right. Okay, but see how this just easily goes in. See, I left some dark shadow there too, where I think maybe the light might not hit there. I'm going to do the same over here. I'm going to come up here and I'm down and to the left on that peak. I'm going to kind of fill in these gaps, and you can kind of scrape along like you're buttering a piece of bread, to be honest with you, on the shadow side. It doesn't have to be like the snow side where only the paint touches. Here you can do all kinds of things because you really don't want a ton of paint jumping off your canvas, so using less paint is better. But see how I'm giving everything its own distinct shadow side to the mountain. And because there's a lot of paint color variety here, it really makes a nice texture. You've got that nice dark base color paint there, plus you have this a little bit lighter shadow side, so it gives multiple shades of the blue. I would even tell you, if you're really wanting to spend your time painting mountains, mix several different shades of this color so that every time you put color on the canvas, it's a different color. Your mountains will improve tremendously if you do that. Bob, in 27 minutes, generally only had enough time to put a color or two into his scenes, or to each element of his scenes. So I don't want you to think that that's the only way that it can be done. And I would bet, I didn't know Bob personally, but I would bet that if Bob had enough time, unlimited time on the show like we do in the video world today, that he would mix multiple colors and really do some wonders with the variety in these shadows. Okay, so all right, so let's just assume this is all in shadow over here. So this whole mountain, this whole little peak off in the distance might be overshadowed by that large one, so I'm not even going to put any highlights on it. And these back here are in the distance, and see how they're nice and fuzzy on the top? That was a result of that filbert brush, so that makes those look like they're further back in the distance. And that automatically makes this one seem closer because we have little sharper edges on the top here, but this one back here is off further in distance. So kind of think about those things too, and in future videos we'll really kind of discuss composition and how these elements work. But look how fast these mountains went, and I was actually even taking my time plus talking the entire time. So that's how fast that can go in. Now that's step two. So now that we've got our mountains and our shadow side in, right? So we put our base in, we put our highlights and shadows in on our mountains. Now let's create a little bit of a mist down here. And then we will do that with I'll take a clean 1-inch landscape brush, and I'm just gonna use the corner of this brush up in here, and I'm gonna kind of tap here. So, if you're working on your highlight side, make sure that you're going up up those hills, and if you're on your shadow side, we're gonna go up this way. And what we do is we just take that corner of that brush, and we're very literally just kind of tapping out and destroying some of our mountains. You don't have to do a lot, but I will tell you that if you had a less than favorable experience creating your mountains, this is a nice way that you can kind of hide some of those things that you weren't as happy with. Okay, so don't go straight across because that'll be very obvious. The reason kind of why we go up and down these the mountains is because it makes the lines uneven, makes it look like you've got mist kind of floating out there. You generally don't see things cut off in nature exactly perfectly. So that's all we're doing here. We're just going to kind of walk this up, and we're going to destroy the base of our mountain. All right, so now that we've got that off, if you've got a lot of paint down here, you can wipe that off onto your paper towel or whatever you've got, clean lint-free rag. Well, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my brush and I'm going to rotate it so that I'm using the sides of the bristles of the brush, not the front. It's very important that you use the sides of the bristles of the brush because a lot of times people will want to brush out their elements on their paintings by using the ends of the bristles of the brush, but when you do that, that paint flies right through. That paint grabs it, sticks it, and then when you start sliding that all around your canvas, you're gonna destroy everything. So it's better to have a light touch and to use the sides of the bristles of the brush, okay? And the way we do this is we're just gonna, now we've tapped up the sides of the mountains, we're gonna brush up the same way that we tapped out those mountains, and I'm gonna exaggerate the motion. It's gonna be very slow. I'm gonna exaggerate this motion for you. We're gonna come across using the sides of the bristles of the brush and then away from the canvas, okay? And we just kind of take out those tap marks. We go up the slopes of our mountains exactly the way we tapped them and just brush them lightly with using the sides of the ends of the bristles of the brush. Okay, the sides of the ends, not the ends, the sides of the ends. If you really want to get crazy with it, you can lay it till it's almost parallel to the canvas and do this too, and that works great. And for some of my students who are struggling with that, I will often suggest that they do that, and it does help tremendously. So if you are struggling a little bit, that's a way that you can improve that. Now look how beautiful that mountain is. Now notice down here that we've got water underneath that we put in a previous video, the skies, I think the skies and water video. It'll be, the link for that will be in the description, as I mentioned earlier. So we've got this mountain now that's kind of floating, but you might see, I'm not sure if you can see it on that camera, we kind of have a little bit of a harsher line down here. Now that we've kind of made some mist down here, I'm actually even gonna kind of use these crisscrossy rocking strokes to kind of finish this off to make sure that this mountain appears that it's floating above the water. So what we've done here is we've created a bunch of what appears to be mist down there, and that's going to set us up for success. It helps us give the illusion of distance between the next element that we'll put into our painting and the base of our mountain. I sure hope this video has been helpful for you. Make sure that you check out the other videos that I mentioned, and the supplies that I've used in this video are in the description below this video. Thanks so much. See you next time.